Welcome to the podcast Friday Feels, brought to you by the Office of Counseling and Wellness at Berkeley College. I'm your host and personal counselor, Sarah Nickerson. Join our journey with Berkeley students as they navigate the challenges of the current pandemic with strength, creativity, and wisdom. New episodes released every Friday. Thanks for listening. All right, so welcome to Friday Feels. How are you doing today?
I am okay. I'm doing good. It's been a better day than the rest of the days that have recently passed.
Yeah. Well, so here on Friday Feels, generally what we do is we start by asking the student just to tell us a little bit about themselves, and whatever you want to share is great.
Okay, well, my name is Naomi L. Dunstan. I go to Berkeley College. I'm a fashion merchandising and management major. I'm the president of Fashion Courts, which is the fashion club at the New York City campus. I'm also a member at large on Student Government Association, and also I serve as secretary in the National Society of Leadership and Success, which is
Dang, girl.
I know, which is one of the largest honor societies here in the United States.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. And when are you graduating?
So I'm actually due to graduate, 2021?
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. You have plans for after?
I'm still trying to work it out. I try to take things one semester at a time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I find if I think too far ahead, then if I have too high of an expectation, then I'm disappointed. So
Right.
I'm like, you know what, if I can create like small little steps, throughout the process, I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah, no, there's no need. I mean, when I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So there's definitely a lot of time, but it sounds like you're super organized and involved and a lot of different things on campus.
Yeah, on campus, and I work outside of all of that. So yeah, it's definitely hard to manage.
Wow.
I would say like when we were on campus, it felt a lot easier because I had physical locations to be in. And I know for sometimes people, when they're hopping from place to place, it's not the most convenient, but I felt like, okay, if I was physically in a space, I knew how long I was going to be there for,
Right.
who I was speaking to directly, what had to get done, and then I move on to the next. I find like being home, having to work remotely, it's a lot more difficult because again, like my work schedule kind of interferes with what my availability is when we're having our Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
So it's been harder to manage my crazy schedule, and a lot of times I don't realize how much I do until I look at my calendar or somebody gives me the reaction that you did, and it's like, oh, whoa, what?
Yeah, man, you're doing a lot, and especially working full time. What do you do for work?
So I work in the retail space. I handle like online orders. So during this time, if people are still ordering things online, we're still making sure that people are getting the products that they're ordering. The store was actually closed for a bit. I would say like a month. They actually closed on my birthday, which was funny. Happy birthday to me.
Nice.
So, we've been back at work for a little bit more than a month now, and it's a much smaller team.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that. And then also I do federal work study. So I work in academic advisement. So I check in on the students, see how they're performing throughout their semester, and, make sure that they are aware of all the resources that we have at the school. Whatever they're, I'm by no means a staff member or anything. So I'm even limited in what I, can offer them. But I'm like, hey, if you ever just need to talk, for like 15, 20 minutes, I'm here.
Yeah.
So
you're a good friend, good person, hard worker.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And it's also cool, like, as a federal work study, when I'm like speaking to a student, it feels good, I think, even for myself, because again, I'm still a student regardless of all of the things that I take on.
Right.
So sometimes when I hear of another student who's also managing, let's say like their family or a full-time job and like a full-time work schedule, it's like, okay, well, if this person can do it, I can definitely stick it out. And I don't have to, I shouldn't complain because, so I think it's good when I'm able to connect with other students. on that level as well, and, help keep each other motivated. And of course, remind them to reach out to their academic advisor.
Yes, of course. Yeah, there's something that's like when we have a lot on our plate or when we're going through something, there can be something really validating about talking to other people who are going through the same thing. But it also sounds like you're super empathetic and you're really good about making space for other people.
Yeah, during this time, I've been told to chill out on that.
Yeah.
I had one of my mentors, we have each other on social media, and I don't really post that much on social media, but with everything that's going on, I've been opening up and sharing a little bit more, just because in my immediate circles, and of course not having, I guess, the people around that I normally would, I felt limited in who I can speak to and what I can speak to them about. So I was just like, I have my social media platform. And I mean, my Instagram page was actually my form of therapy. I've posted a lot of flowers and uplifting quotes just to get me through the day.
Yeah,
so I was like, why not kind of just put a little bit out there? I don't want my whole page to be all of like, all about my feels. But, during this time, I was like, I'm going through this, and it's been challenging to kind of find the words and to have people understand the things that I'm seeing and how I'm processing it. So, my mentor saw that, and, even still with all of the things that I'm doing, it's the mindfulness of remembering how many spaces I'm in and how much I am putting out there.
Yeah.
And it's important to like kind of retract a little bit, and it's okay to not feel guilty about doing that. So I would say like this week, I kind of struggled with that for the past 2 weeks, but this week in particular, I felt a lot better. I kind of feel like I'm getting back to normal in terms of just like, keeping my schedule organized and making sure that I'm, meeting my deadlines, but it's still challenging.
Of course. Yeah. Well, it's hard when there is so much going on because we have the pandemic and obviously the racial injustice that's been happening in our country for, centuries. But talk to me a little bit about what, the last few weeks have been like for you. I know you had said at the beginning that the last few weeks had been tough. So whatever you want to share around that, I'd love to hear.
So when the news of Ahmaud Arbery hit all of our social media platforms, like the video, I don't watch, videos like that. I mean, the content like that has been out there for years. In the books that were passed down to me from my father, reading these things of what has happened to Black men and women in this country, just from them simply trying to live. Ahmaud Arbery's death really hit me because, I don't know, like even now, like thinking about it, I just get very emotional and just sad. And, even recently when the transcripts came out and we heard what they were saying as they, basically executed him, it was just horrific. So that hit me, and, I was just sad for a long time. And then with George Floyd's death, it was just the same thing. It's like you're literally watching these people being executed on camera, and you have people standing around just watching, and it's insane. It's horrific, and it just hurts because I immediately think of my brothers. I think of my father. I think of my friends, and some of the experiences that they have had just driving a car or walking down the street or being in their own backyard or being on their porch or, just trying to do the work that they're trying to do. And, the senselessness of it all, like how someone can feel obliged to take someone's life just simply because they don't like them or like the way that they look. And I know people are saying, oh, this is 2020. We shouldn't be thinking like that, or people shouldn't be doing that. But the reality is that this is the long history of this country, and it doesn't just happen to Black Americans. If a lot of people would even look into the things that Native Americans go through, Indigenous people in this country. And even though these things aren't in your face, doesn't mean these things don't happen. So I've been processing that a lot. And I have been out marching and protesting and making my voice heard. And When I'm out there and I'm, saying, say her name and the crowd is responding, Breonna Taylor, it's, that there is so much power in all of that. So I think there's just a lot of emotions. There's anger, and it's just like also the feeling of unity that we see out in the streets. If you have people from all different walks of life out there, young people, old people. And I think I was just responding to all of the stimulus,
Of course.
And my friend, one of my friends said it really good yesterday. And she was like, it's important to be able to speak up for our communities, even though we may not be directly affected by what's happening. But it's also important to stay grounded and to remember what your purpose is and not lose yourself in the fight. But, if there's a way to tie your purpose into responding to what's happening in the world, then, do that. But it's just been a lot of anger and me trying to figure out what my voice is and all of that, and how to use my own platforms to speak on and, help other people elevate their voices. And, within this time, I've been very fortunate to know that a lot of people who I've been able to grow with over the past few years, I would say like 5 years or so, are very like-minded. And, we are all out protesting at, the times that we're available, and people are posting. So, it gives me some sense of comfort, but it's like, I think controlling the things that we have, controlling what we can do, right? So it's signing petitions, it's making phone calls, it's donating. And, given my crazy schedule, those are the things that I can do when I'm not out there protesting.
Of course. Yeah.
So I've been working through all of that, all of my feels.
Of course. Yeah, it's good. And I love what you said about like naming things is so important, right? Like part of what's perpetuated the racial injustice in our country is particularly the white community not naming things or not sitting in the pain of what is happening and taking responsibility for it. But then it sounds like from your end, also naming it is empowering, being able to voice what's happening in the community, to voice what's going on with you, to have that platform, to have your Instagram where you can share uplifting things. Like there's a real power in being able to name it. And then it sounds like the second part of that you said, which was like feeling what you're feeling, but also not almost like spiraling into it, so that you can stay motivated and keep moving forward. Which I can imagine is very difficult to do.
It is. And I think having the people around you and also just being aware that, within ourselves, it's important to recognize that. And, if you can catch yourself, just catch yourself and, just hold yourself in that space where you're at. And, that's something that I've had to do. And while I'm holding myself in that space, I've just been very fortunate, I feel, to have my friends more than anything. Just remind me, hey, self-care, #self-care. Because that's my motto for life.
Yeah, I love that. Self-care is so important. For sure.
Yeah. So, I think if people weren't speaking about it, I think I would have definitely spiraled down, where it's like I give up and, I forget of how far I've come in my own personal journey and how long it took me to get where I'm at.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's important. And what's funny is that I've actually been trying to schedule, trying to find a therapist at school, and then you hit me up.
Nice. We can talk after.
Right. So it's funny, like in this whole process, it's just funny how things really just work themselves out. For the better. And, during this time, it was definitely just that voice within me that's saying, okay, slow down. Because if I listen to that voice that says slow down, it's, okay, I'm moving too fast, or I'm responding to something too fast, or I'm saying something that I may not necessarily mean because I'm angry. And it's important to slow down as I'm taking in all of this, this news. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, And one thing like I like remind people is like you should be angry, like you should be upset, you should feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a natural and just reaction to what's going on in our country. And so to feel those things is a necessary part of the healing. We can't heal if we don't feel. It's like a thing that we say a lot in counseling, but it's true. Like we have
Mm-hmm.
to be able to really feel what's going on in the world um, to be able to heal it. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, so you've it sounds like you're doing a lot of different things in terms of activism and using your voice. What have the protests been like for you? I know you said that there's a sense of unity and empowerment. Is there one moment in particular that has stuck out to you as really powerful?
So I went to the first protest that happened. It was that Friday. I don't have the date, but it was one of the first protests that happened
Yeah.
right after George Floyd's death. And that protest felt different because it was just, I don't know, the energy was just different in that experience in terms of, okay, like what is happening. It was just like, all right, we need to just stop and pause and recognize that this is what, like, everyone stop. Like
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
that's what that energy felt like. Stop,
Mm.
listen, this is what happened. And then the second protest I went to, it was a very different feel where it was um I I'd seen, so it was, the crowd was much bigger and the
Yeah.
march was much longer.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it felt more uplifting, but it
Sure.
definitely felt like everyone was. Let me backtrack a little bit. So on my way to the protest, the
Yeah.
second protest, a lot of people were on the train. And it's funny, we were all looking around at each other because everybody's wearing black.
Mm,
And
yep.
you see some people with signs, but
Yeah.
nobody's really speaking to each other. But it's all just like, we're all just
Yeah.
like, where are you going?
Right. Right.
It's like, like, do you know what I'm on this train for? It's almost, it's like, does this person know what I'm out here to do?
Right.
Type of thing. And
Yeah.
then when the train stopped and we all got off of the train, somebody said it. She was like, "Oh, the whole train is going to this protest. Okay, cool." Uh,
Oh, I
so
love that.
yeah. So I think it was just a shot. And I mean, like, from like when everyone got off of that train and you just saw, just from the train station, walking through that tunnel, I believe it was around City Hall. We had, like, you just saw an army of people
Yeah.
exiting. And,
Yeah.
even though we're protesting about, police brutality, the police were like, "Oh, you actually it might be faster if you exit through that side." So,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the unity in that moment that it's like,
Of course.
you never know who you're around, right?
Yeah.
But the simple fact that we all somehow congregated in one space and we continued that, and the crowd just continued to grow and grow and grow. And as we were walking and marching, there are some people that were shouting, different chants. So it might have
Yeah.
been say her name or say his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really cool that I hear somebody from across the street, you know, their voice is not being amplified. So, like, I'm on the other side and I'm like helping that person, lead the chant.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
then the crowd was like, "Oh, okay, let's make sure that we are, doing this together." So it felt more unified. In that sense, I felt like a lot of
Absolutely.
people were
Yeah.
out there and a lot of people were angry, but I feel like a lot of people were also in that space of, like, finding their own voice in this and making sure that their voice was heard and knowing that they're supported in that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely felt unified where, the
Yeah.
first time it was everyone stop, pay
Absolutely.
attention, listen.
Yeah. I love that image of just like what you said of like maybe one person was trying to say something in one corner and then you would pick it up in the other. And I think sometimes that's why people don't say
Mm-hmm.
anything, right? Because they're just like, well, like, what can I do? Like what can one voice do, or what can one person do? Um, but the one voice adds to the many, and then that idea of like when we're unified, then it creates this movement. It's such a really beautiful picture of that.
Right. And also the protests I've been to have been safe. I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
been in I haven't been in crowds or been around that environment where violence has kind of um, shown itself. So that's also really good.
Yeah. No, the ones that I've been to have also been very calm.
Yeah. And when I see the videos of, the violent protests or, what the police are, doing to peaceful protesters, I'm like, what? Like,
I know. It's really, really effed up.
yeah. I'm like, how, how? I always say how sway, but like, how does that even?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I know. It's really just like, like you said, it's hard to watch. It's hard to sit with. But it's unfortunately a reality of what's going on. And hopefully, the protests have, I think they have given light to a lot of that, eliminating even more of the police brutality that's been going on in a lot of ways. And yeah, it can be really hard to see. What do you feel like? I know you speak a lot about staying grounded and about slowing down. What kind of helps you to maintain your sense of hope or balance with everything that's going on?
I'm being tuned in, paying attention. So, I'm within the realm of fashion, and I find like a lot of majority of my studies, even before being at Berkeley, has mainly been within social science, which I think is very interesting. And I'm always like, how do I find myself in these spaces of activism? And, fashion isn't necessarily this space that encourages activism and individuality. So I have been making it a point to follow people within the fashion industry who are speaking out about this and using their platform. And they know that they are risking it because of, the racial disparities within fashion. And they know that they might lose a few clients or lose a few followers. And their whole attitude to it is like, you know what, if you have a problem with what I'm saying and me using my voice and my platform to speak out on my experience and the experiences of other Black Americans, Black and Brown Americans, then I don't need you in my circle anyway. So I think for me, definitely staying tuned into the conversations that are still happening, even making sure that the news sources that I'm receiving information from are giving me the most accurate information. For me, it's checking in with my friends. We still talk about it and we talk about what we're doing in our own individual spaces. So for me, it's still continuing the conversations that are happening, even though, again, like I'm not out at the protest, but making sure that I'm in spaces where the conversation is continuously going and moving and, people are doing what they can. So that keeps me grounded. And, even though I feel like I've made a practice of being inclusive and encouraging people to speak about their experiences, especially when it relates to racism and being culturally in tune. For me, that's important. With fashion courts, that was always my intention, is to bridge the gap between, people who wouldn't necessarily speak to people who look different from them, to the people who are eager to speak to people who look different from them. So, and, just remembering that that's going to be, that's a long-term, project, constantly bridging these gaps between what makes us different and what makes us similar. And we have a lot more things in common than we do differences. And I think conversation is the most important thing and the best way to keep people unified and keep people together. So being in tune and continuing the conversation has definitely been one of the things that's been able to keep me grounded. And, just also making sure that I have my cup of coffee every morning.
I'm drinking mine right now.
Right. Me too. So, keeping my, my daily small routines.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's important.
Bringing all those pieces of self-care in, right? Like you have the social piece of self-care. You have sounds like you have sort of like a spiritual practice of grounding yourself. You have your physical self-care of making sure you're, drinking something, eating something. All those areas are important. And I love what you said about conversations. I was talking to my one of my good friends, Devin, and he was saying that for him, the most important thing about the movement was people sitting with him in his pain. Like that, pain is very personal. And there's a difference between engaging in something from maybe like a performance activism piece or even just from like a more distanced activism piece. It's easier to do, right? It's still important. But the difference of really like sitting with somebody and taking the time to know their story, and to empathetically feel with them and to try to connect with them in that way, like that's really what can enact sort of that long-term change that you're talking about.
Yeah. There's a really good talk from Daryl Davis. He is a rock and roll musician, and he actually did have a book out, has a book out, and I watched his talk on Google, and also, sorry, the trains can distract me at times.
It's fine.
So I watched his talk I listened to his talk on Google and also listened to his talk on TED Talks, and they were very similar, but I really liked his Google presentation, and he told the same story in both, but it was really about just that communication and how he used his work to answer a question that he has been asking himself since the time he was 10 years old. And the question was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so he tells a story of, how he became members with the Ku Klux. He became friends with members of the Ku Klux Klan, and what that experience is like. And all I kept thinking was, this guy every time was so dedicated to answering that question that he put himself in harm's way.
Wow. Yeah.
But the main thing that I took away from that is, we hate things that we fear.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole, the fact that he was able to find an in to in a very fearful space, it just showed me that this guy was fearless.
Yeah.
It's like he didn't fear what was going to happen to him. Maybe he did, but the message that I took away from that is, being fearless. And I think his fearlessness really just came from wanting to just simply engage in conversation and ask questions.
Yeah.
But also listen. That's the most important thing, right? Absolutely. It's listening. And I'll be honest, I haven't really been listening. Well, I'm usually a really good listener.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, so I would say like this time it felt good for my friends to be listeners.
Yeah.
And to create space for me in that sense, because I think it's definitely important is to listen to, why people are so angry, why people are so frustrated, and what their own stories are.
And creating that space.
Because like you said, it is very important to feel. And I saw something on I believe it was Instagram. It said, not caring is caring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like white silence is violence.
Right. Right.
Like this like space where we kind of like turn away or we sanitize the situation. Like that's also, as a white woman, like that's complicit in a lot of the racism that's happening. And so acknowledging the ways in which, silence or not listening or turning our face away is also part of the problem is really important.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I read, I don't know if you have heard of the book, The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton.
I haven't, no.
But he was wrongly accused of a crime, and then he was put on death row for almost 30 years. It was a really long time. But it's a very powerful book. But he talked about his experiences on death row and how one night he heard this guy crying in the cell next to his, and he was like, so angry, obviously, about being there, not wanting to be there. And then in that moment, though, he couldn't ignore that guy's cries. And so he reached out to him. He was like, hey, man, what's going on? And the guy said his mom had died. And so they kind of like bonded in this moment and they became really good friends. And then like a long time into their friendship, he found out that this man that he had befriended was on death row for lynching a 14-year-old boy, and that his dad was part of the KKK. And he, in his book, just talks about how difficult it was for him to find that out about his friend. but also how their relationship really, I mean, their relationship obviously changed each other. Like when his friend was finally executed for his crime, his last words were, "I love you."
Mm.
And it was just this like very powerful story of two people who should in no way have ever crossed paths or been friends, and Anthony and his extreme grace and humility like continued that
Mm.
um that friendship. But yeah, there's just this power to relationship that when we are afraid or when there's hate in our heart, it can't move forward.
Right.
But yeah, but it's a hard thing to do. And it sounds like, Naomi, it sounds like you have really been doing it. And I thank you for that, especially for being willing to come on today and talk about these things. I know that you don't know me, and so I take it as a great privilege that you're willing to share.
Oh, I love talking to people.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I was sharing with one of my girlfriends, Nicole. We had worked together in the past, but, with everything that's happened, obviously our relationship has gotten a lot stronger. And we know that we love each other, but now we actually say it, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And I was telling her, I was like, my parents raised me to be very integrated. I've always been around people who look different from me, who speak multiple different languages, if not, one outside of English. And I've spent a lot of time around people who don't look like me, and also a lot of time around people who do look like me. So it has never been challenging for me to make an effort to connect with someone. And I think a lot of people may not be taught that. I think that hate is something that we teach. I don't know how often people teach love, but I know that I definitely grew up in a loving household. I definitely make a practice out of showing love. And I'm from Brooklyn, so I show love the Brooklyn way. So I think the same way that hate is taught, we need to teach people how to love.
Yeah.
And, not just saying it, but actually making it a daily practice. And I think that's hard. Because I think it just goes back to people being able to take responsibility for their, for their actions and owning it and saying, hey, I realize what I did. I'm sorry. And I'm not going to do it again, or I'll do better.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think, I don't know, I definitely am still hopeful for, what's to come, and it's not going to be easy. And so long as we continue having conversations, I think we'll definitely get to where we're trying to get as a society. And I believe I've actually seen you on campus, and I actually have been, you are like definitely one of the people that I'm like, who is that woman? I want to talk to her, but I don't know her. So again, like, I'm glad that we were able to connect the way that we have been. And also that Sherelle connected us. So that's actually really good, because Sherelle has definitely played a huge part in my involvement in school.
Yeah, Cheryl's great. I really like her a lot. Well, my last question for you will be, if you could provide one, it could be a resource, encouragement, all the above to other Berkeley students, what would it be?
Man. I know we're not able to do that right now in terms of being active on campus and really getting to know our schoolmates, but definitely if there is a platform that we have on campus, we have Yammer. To find ways to get involved and engage in conversations within our Berkeley College community. We are still a community, even though we are not physically in the same space. So the same way that I was apprehensive about getting involved in any school campus, campus activities, because I was like, I just want to do my classes and be done. It has really helped me step into my own and, allowed me to be confident in who I am, and furthermore, to build relationships and learn how to manage and nurture my relationships. So I definitely encourage students to find ways to be more active on campus, even though we only have our online resources like Yammer. So talk to your schoolmates, get to know who your classmates are. You might learn something.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Naomi. I'm so glad that I got to talk to you this morning. Like I said, it was a privilege. I loved hearing what you had to say, and you have a really powerful voice, and I'm excited to see how things move forward with you, and excited for you to graduate and really change the fashion industry. I have no doubt that I will be, I'll obviously see you around campus, but I have a feeling I'll probably see you, in other places too, as you impact, make a difference and make a change within the industry.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's true. I wouldn't say if it wasn't true. But yeah, I mean, thanks for coming on. If you ever want to come back, we'd love to have you. If you have any friends that you would recommend that would want to be on it, I'd love to hear their voice as well. But
yes.
I just keep gratitude. Thank you for being on here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was definitely something I looked forward to all week. I kept telling you, I was like, oh my God, guys, you would never guess what I'm doing on Saturday or Friday, actually.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was really a great talk, and thank you for creating space for it. I know it's not easy, but you did it very well, and you made it easy to engage in the conversation as well. So
thanks, Naomi.
I appreciate that.
You. Well, have a good rest of your weekend, and stay safe and stay well, and make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for now. Join us next week for another episode of Friday Feels. Enjoy your weekend and stay safe. Be well.